Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi. Coming up in today's show. Protesters slam the government for the inadequate funding of Brazil's National Museum as it goes up in smoke, damaging millions of artefacts. The confirmation hearing for President Trump's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh is marred by chaos, with dozens of protesters arrested for interrupting proceedings. Also on the programme, Nike chooses the NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick as the face of its new advertising campaign. But first, the number of the week is 20 million. That's the number of artefacts in Brazil's National Museum, where a fire broke out this week. Only an estimated 10% of the items have been saved. The blaze has sparked outrage, with protesters taking to the streets to criticise the government, who they blame for not providing the museum with adequate funding.
A day after thousands of years of history were burned in just a matter of hours, Brazilians are grappling with the monumental loss.
It's hard to explain with words what we've lost. We're here today to say goodbye to the museum and to fight for its restoration, even as a place of memory. Because it's our memory, the memory of our people is here.
As sadness turned to anger, protesters forced their way through closed gates and marched toward the building. In an attempt to reassure the country over the future of the museum, Brazil's education minister said the government was ready to step up.
The federal government, together with several ministries and the University of Rio de Janeiro, will create an executive committee for the restoration of the museum. The Ministry of Education will immediately allocate €2.1 million to secure the remaining exhibits.
But for protesters, the promise was too little, too late.
The building can be rebuilt, but the collection is lost forever. 200 years of work by researchers, curators and professors who gave their heart and soul to the museum, and it all went up in flames because of the negligence of the Brazilian state.
The institution had recently secured approval to obtain €4.5 million for renovations, including an upgrade of the fire prevention system. But the money never came. Firefighters initially struggled to contain the blaze as the two fire hydrants closest to the museum were out of order. Founded in 1818, the museum was home to some 20 million pieces, including Egyptian and Greco-Roman artifacts, as well as the oldest human skull found in the Western Hemisphere.
Now, the image of the week is the island of Saint Martin, 1 year on after Hurricane Irma hit, leaving a trail of destruction behind. The question is how to rebuild physically the island, but also its residents psychologically. One neighbourhood association has been focusing on helping children to come to terms with the trauma of the hurricane.
Run. Looking for clearer skies ahead. These children, left traumatised by Hurricane Irma, are learning to trust the wind again.
I'm not afraid anymore.
Flying kites is one of the many activities arranged by Marie-Paul Rousseau-Cornette, a social worker who is helping these children along the road to recovery.
As soon as they heard thunder, a door slamming or the wind, the children became frightened.
A year ago, Hurricane Irma wreaked havoc on Quartier d'Orléans, a working-class village on the eastern coast of Saint Martin. This summer, artists and psychologists volunteered here, organising a workshop that allowed the children to tell their stories themselves.
I talked about all the terrible things, my feelings, my fears, the cries of joy. Drawings help me talk about it.
The children have intense memories on an emotional level that they're really trying to forget, and ultimately there are more long-term consequences that can be avoided through techniques like this, by communicating.
Thanks to donors, the oldest children have taken a trip to Paris. It's their first time on the mainland.
For me, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's good for them to be far from Saint Martin and have a holiday, to breathe a bit, to have a taste of what there is elsewhere, to start to live.
Back in Saint Martin, the children have written and choreographed a song about Irma. Turning the page on the disaster through music and step by step rediscovering their lost innocence.
Day one of the confirmation hearing for President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh was marred by chaotic scenes with dozens of people arrested for interrupting proceedings. Well, many protesters were dressed as the women from the dystopian novel The Handmaid's Tale, which depicts a world where women have lost control and ownership of their bodies. Well, demonstrators and opposition Democrats alike fear, if approved, 53-year-old Kavanaugh will have a more socially conservative approach to abortion. Anti-abortion groups, meanwhile, have been drumming up support for Donald Trump's nominee, going door-to-door and talking to residents across key battleground states. France 24's Clément Bonnereau has this report.
From Capitol Hill to West Virginia, the battle for Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation is played out in small towns and suburbs.
We definitely are not for abortion.
Okay.
We love our babies. We want pro-life candidates.
That's what we do.
We want children. We want babies. Hey, come here. No.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh.
Ever since Donald Trump nominated the 53-year-old conservative judge to the Supreme Court, 500 volunteers from this anti-abortion organization have been canvassing the streets for support.
I'm Michael and this is Jessica. We represent the Susan B. Anthony list. We're trying to get voters to get your current Senator Joe Manchin to vote yes to confirm President Trump's nomination.
Activists are pinning their hopes on voters in key battleground states ahead of the November midterm elections.
Is that something that you'd be for as well? Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. Would you mind taking one of these as well?
Sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, well, have a great day. God bless you too.
Here. Thank you.
Their mission to get voters to pressure their senators to back Kavanaugh's nomination.
For decades, the pro-abortion lobby has run to the courts as sort of their last backstop to superimpose their will on the rest of the nation. And what we want to say is no more.
To confirm,
if approved, Kavanaugh's nomination would push the Supreme Court to the right, paving the way for what activists hope would be stricter laws on abortion.
What's pivoting is giving that responsibility back to the states to decide. 56% of people from West Virginia would prefer that their state representatives make decisions about abortion and the pro-life issue as opposed to an activist judge or the courts.
Kavanaugh's views on abortion are not entirely clear. However, he has supported restrictions in the past. In any case, it remains to be seen whether the landmark Roe v. Wade law could be overturned, given the Supreme Court's tradition of standing by its older decisions.
The White House has called an incendiary tell-all book by Bob Woodward, the reporter who helped bring down President Richard Nixon, fabricated lies. Entitled Fear, the book details current and ex-aides calling President Trump an idiot and a liar, and has sparked anger in Washington. Well, the book also quotes Trump's chief of staff, John Kelly, questioning the president's mental faculties, allegedly declaring during one meeting we're in crazy town. Kelly has since dismissed those claims. Next, Nike is facing backlash after making the NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick the face of its new advertising campaign. The 30-year-old made headlines for kneeling during the US national anthem back in 2016 to protest against racial injustice and police brutality. Well, Nike described the controversial player as one of the most inspirational athletes of his generation. Clément Bonnereau reports.
He's one of America's most controversial football players, and he has sacrificed it all for his beliefs. Colin Kaepernick, the former NFL quarterback best known for kneeling during the US national anthem in 2016, is the new face of the Nike Just Do It advertising campaign. Speaking to sports website ESPN, Nike described him as
one of the most inspirational athletes of this generation, who's leveraged the power of sport to help move the world forward.
Kaepernick was the first player to kneel during the American anthem, protesting against what he said was racial inequality and injustice in his country. Other players followed suit, drawing criticism from President Donald Trump as well as some supporters. Nike has sponsored Kaepernick since 2011. However, the latest campaign has sparked mixed reactions on social media, one critic even posting a video of him burning his shoes. while another accused Nike of doing this for the money. It's not the first time the US sports brand has taken a firm political stance. Last year, it released a 90-second video ad calling for more equality in the US, featuring African-American athletes LeBron James and Serena Williams.
And finally, for those of you who remember the instruction to follow the yellow brick road, you'll almost certainly remember the character Dorothy's iconic ruby slippers. Well, the very slippers worn by Judy Garland in the film The Wizard of Oz were stolen 13 years ago while on display at a museum. The FBI now says the shoes have been recovered, but they're asking the public to help identify the suspects linked with the theft and a recent scheme to extort money from the owners of the red sequined shoes. Well, that's it for this edition of Inside the Americas. See you again at the same time next week.